Xi Jinping's governance model is built on a principle that appears almost medieval in the modern age. The Communist Party controls everything that matters. Since rising to power in 2012, Xi has engineered a centralization of authority so complete that it would make previous Chinese leaders look like federalists by comparison. His mandate, as he sees it, is absolute party control, and with party control comes the guarantee of regime survival. In his view, this is not a feature of his system, but its entire foundation. National security in the Xi paradigm is not something you negotiate or compromise on. It is not something you solve with economic incentives or trade agreements. It is the single organizing principle that overrides every other consideration. The anti-corruption campaigns that swept through the party ranks were not really about corruption at all, although corruption was certainly involved. They were about eliminating rivals, consolidating power, and ensuring that every official who rose through the ranks understood one thing above all else. Loyalty to Xi Jinping came before competence, before innovation, before regional interests. This has created a paradox at the very heart of Xi's China. The system now demands loyalty first, capability second. Bureaucrats are chosen based on their political reliability rather than their merit or their ability to adapt to local conditions. This has produced a governing apparatus that is unified in its purpose, but brittle in its flexibility. And this brittleness will define much of what China attempts to do in the coming decade. This control imperative creates a fundamental contradiction within Xi's economic strategy. China's economy, which has grown at remarkable speeds for 4 decades, now faces a choice between two fundamentally incompatible paths. On one hand, Xi understands that China's power in the world derives from its economic strength. He knows that if China's economy stalls, so does the military buildup, the technological advancement, the global infrastructure projects, and ultimately the ability to challenge Western dominance. The party's legitimacy rests partly on economic growth. On the other hand, consumption-led growth requires trusting market mechanisms, expanding space for private entrepreneurs, and allowing the preferences of ordinary Chinese households to influence how resources are allocated. This is the opposite of what Xi's control imperative demands. Xi has chosen to privilege state dominance of strategic sectors, command and control planning, and technological self-reliance over allowing market mechanisms to work. By prioritizing technology and industrial capacity over the needs and preferences of consumers and markets, Xi is creating structural imbalances that could eventually undermine the very economic power he seeks to protect. The very systems he has built to ensure control could be the mechanism through which China's growth eventually falters. But Xi does not see himself as presiding over stagnation or decline. In his mind, he is pursuing the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation, a concept that echoes through every policy speech and party congress. This rejuvenation, he has stated clearly, cannot be achieved without unification with Taiwan, and this rejuvenation is not scheduled for next year or the year after that. Xi has set the target for 2049, the 100th anniversary of the People's Republic. That is a 25-year timeline, and it represents Xi's calculation that the Taiwan issue can be managed, deferred, and ultimately resolved through the slow accumulation of pressure rather than through immediate military action. At the start of 2026, the People's Liberation Army conducted exercises called Justice Mission 2025, involving 89 warplanes, drone swarms, and blockade simulations. Taiwan called it unprecedented. But on his New Year's address, Xi used different language. He spoke of reunification not as an imminent act, but as an inevitable historical trend. In classical Chinese political philosophy, this concept of historical inevitability carries weight. It suggests that the outcome is already determined by the forces of history itself. If reunification is inevitable, then there is no need to force it violently today. One merely needs to grow large enough, strong enough, and dominant enough that the forces of historical gravity pull Taiwan toward the mainland on their own. These military exercises serve a different purpose in this framework. They are not preparation for invasion. They are an access denial shield designed to freeze the status quo and lock out external interference, particularly if the United States and Japan. The Taiwan strategy, then, is not impatience but patience. It is the long game, the slow strangling, the anaconda strategy that Taiwan's own naval commander has described as China aiming to slowly but surely surround the island. But while Xi pursues this long game on Taiwan, he is acutely aware that he cannot afford to lose the broader competition for economic and technological dominance. This is why his New Year's address focused heavily on what the Communist Party calls new quality productive forces. This is terminology for dominance in artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and green energy technologies. These are the battlegrounds of the future, and Xi knows that if China loses these competitions, it will not matter how many warplanes surround Taiwan. Xi cannot successfully absorb Taiwan if China loses the broader war for technological stability and economic leadership. So he buys himself time on the Taiwan issue by framing it as historical inevitability, while he focuses his energy on the domestic challenges of maintaining growth, ensuring technological advancement, and keeping the party unified behind his vision. The 2049 timeline allows him to pursue multiple strategic objectives simultaneously without appearing weak on the Taiwan question. It provides political cover domestically for decisions that prioritize economic and technological competition over military posturing. It gives Beijing the luxury of patient accumulation, which is far more dangerous in the long term than any immediate invasion would be. The mechanism by which Xi intends to extend China's power globally is the Belt and Road Initiative, a project so vast in scope that most Western observers still do not fully appreciate its implications. Launched in 2013, the BRI has since reached over 150 countries and international organizations across 6 overland economic corridors and the 21st century maritime Silk Road. By 2025, participating countries accounted for nearly 75% of the world's population and more than half of global GDP. This is not a trade initiative. This is not an investment program in the traditional sense. This is a comprehensive restructuring of global economic interdependence to benefit China. Since 2013, Chinese engagement through the BRI has cumulatively reached $1.175 trillion. In 2024 alone, Chinese engagement totaled $121.8 billion, a 31% increase from the previous year. The mechanism is elegant in its simplicity. China provides financing to developing countries for infrastructure projects. Those infrastructure projects are built by Chinese firms using Chinese workers and Chinese materials. The finished infrastructure connects those countries more tightly to Chinese supply chains, Chinese markets, and Chinese interests. Over time, the recipient countries become economically dependent on China. When the moment comes for political decisions, those countries face a choice between their traditional allies and the nation that has financed their highways, ports, and railways. The Chanquay port in Peru exemplifies this strategy. In November 2024, Xi himself traveled to Peru to inaugurate it. This port shortens shipping time from Peru to China to just 23 days and cuts logistics costs by at least 20%. It is not a facility for helping Peru trade with other nations. It is a facility for binding Peru's trade to China. Xi has spoken of driving logistics through transport corridors, boosting trade through logistics, and spurring industries through trade. This is the language of someone who understands that infrastructure is not neutral. Infrastructure embeds dependencies. It creates constituencies within foreign nations that benefit from proximity to China. It reshapes the geography of global commerce. By establishing Changsha as a critical node in Asian-Pacific trade with Latin America, Xi is fundamentally altering the patterns of global shipping that have existed for centuries. Goods that once traveled across the Atlantic or through the Suez Canal now travel across the Pacific through ports financed, built, and controlled by or closely aligned with Chinese interests. This expansion of Chinese economic influence is occurring nowhere more intensely than in Southeast Asia, a region that Xi and the Communist Party regard as vital to China's very survival. Following an April 2025 Central Conference on work related to neighboring countries, Xi conducted state visits to Vietnam, Malaysia, and Cambodia, reinforcing a strategy that Beijing calls neighborhood first. China has already become the dominant economic power in Southeast Asia, a position secured through the free trade agreement between ASEAN and China, signed in 2010, and the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership trade deal that entered into force in 2022. China is now the main trading partner of every single country in Southeast Asia. China accounts for 21% of ASEAN exports and 4% of its imports. Control over critical supply chains in manufacturing, electronics, and agriculture has made Southeast Asian economies deeply reliant on Chinese imports. When China restricts outbound tourism, Southeast Asian nations lose significant revenue. When China restricts imports of agricultural products, farmers suffer. The economic entanglement is so complete that these nations have limited room to maneuver in their foreign policy choices. Yet, within this region of overwhelming Chinese economic dominance, a different kind of competition is unfolding, one that exists in the gray zones between peace and war. The South China Sea has become the arena for what strategists call gray zone coercion, a term that describes tactics that are too aggressive to be ignored, but too limited to justify a military response. Under Xi's leadership, the China Coast Guard maintains an almost daily presence at strategically important reefs across the sea which China does not physically occupy. The Guard harasses the lawful activities of neighboring nations within their exclusive economic zones. It protects illegal Chinese fishing fleets and survey vessels. These are not acts of conventional warfare. They are acts of gradual assertion of control, of testing the limits of what neighboring nations and the United States will tolerate. As Southeast Asian states stand firm at a handful of symbolically or economically important locations, China steadily increases the number of vessels it deploys and the aggressiveness of the tactics they employ. This is the anaconda strategy applied to the sea. It is not designed to conquer rapidly. It is designed to constrict slowly, to establish control gradually, to reach a point where the status quo has shifted so far in China's favor that any reversal would require military force that no one wants to employ. Xi Jinping's geopolitical strategy, then, is a product of his understanding that China cannot win through rapid conquest or direct confrontation with the West. Instead, it must win through a combination of patient long-term positioning, economic integration that creates dependencies, technological advancement that closes the gap with the United States, and the gradual expansion of a sphere of influence through infrastructure, trade, and financial relationships. The control imperative that governs his domestic politics has a parallel in his foreign strategy. The slow, methodical expansion of Chinese power and influence until the day comes when the balance of global power has shifted so decisively that the world accepts Chinese primacy as a fact of history rather than a result of military conquest. This is the chairman's code, written in investments and ports, in military exercises and trade agreements, in the patient accumulation of power that expects to dominate not through a single decisive moment, but through 1,000 incremental shifts that collectively transform the world.